أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا وكانت هباء منبثا وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضونة متكئين عليها متقابلين يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأباريق وكأس من معين لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزفون وفاكهة مما يتخيرون ولحم طير مما يشتهون وحور عين كأمثال لؤلؤ مكنون جزاء بما كانوا يعملون لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تعثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما وأصحاب اليمين ما أصحاب اليمين في سدر مخضود وطلح منضود وظل ممدود وماء مسكوب وفاكهة كثيرة لا مقطوعة ولا ممنوعة وفرش مرفوعة إنا أنشأناهن إنشاء فجعلناهن أبكارا عربا أترابا لأصحاب اليمين ثلة من الأولين وثلة من الآخرين وأصحاب الشمال ما أصحاب الشمال في سموم وحميم وظل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك مترفين وكانوا يصرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون أإذا متنا وكنا ترابا وإذا من أئنا لمبعوثون آباؤنا الأولون قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليهم من الحميم فشاربون شرب الحيم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين ألا أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم نشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أأنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدحنون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتصلية جحيم إن هذا لهو حق اليقين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم صدق الله العلي العظيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن عليًا ولي الله أشهد أن عليًا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما
اللهم صل على
وآل محمد صلوات. آباد کریں گے ہم، آباد کریں گے ہم، اب کرب و بلا نانا تیرے شہر سے جاتے ہیں، دے ہم کو دعا نانا تیرے شہر سے جاتے ہیں، دے ہم کو دعا نانا. تیرا دین ہے مشکل میں کیسے رہوں گھر میں، تیرا دین ہے مشکل میں کیسے رہوں گھر میں، طفلی میں کوئی وعدہ، طفلی میں کوئی وعدہ تھا تجھ سے کیا نانا، تیرے شہر سے جاتے ہیں، دے ہم کو دعا نانا. روزے پہ تیرے آ کے ہم شمع جلاتے تھے، روزے پہ تیرے آ کے ہم شمع جلاتے تھے، اب کون مجاور ہے، اب کون مجاور ہے سگھرا کے سوا نانا، تیرے شہر سے جاتے ہیں، دے ہم کو دعا نانا. بچے ہیں بہت چھوٹے، گرمی کا زمانہ ہے، بچے ہیں بہت چھوٹے، گرمی کا زمانہ ہے، پہنچائے گا منزل پر، پہنچائے گا منزل پر اب ہم کو خدا نانا، تیرے شہر سے جاتے ہیں، دے ہم کو دعا نانا. اماں کی لحد چھوٹی، روزہ بھی تیرا چھوٹا، اماں کی لحد چھوٹی، روزہ بھی تیرا چھوٹا، اس وقت کلیجے پر، اس وقت کلیجے پر خنجر سا چلا نانا، تیرے شہر سے جاتے ہیں، دے ہم کو دعا نانا. زینب تیرے روزے پر بے پردہ نہیں آئی، زینب تیرے روزے پر بے پردہ نہیں آئی، اب دیکھ گی سب دنیا، اب دیکھ گی سب دنیا سر اس کا کھلا نانا، تیرے شہر سے جاتے ہیں، دے ہم کو دعا نانا. मेरे साथ में जाती है मासूम सकीना भी, मेरे साथ में जाती है मासूम सकीना भी, परदेस में होएगी, परदेस में होएगी, उस पर भी जफा नाना, तेरे शहर से जाते हैं, दे हमको दुआ नाना, आबाद करेंगे हम, आबाद करेंगे हम, अब कर्बो बला नाना, तेरे शहर से जाते हैं, दे हमको दुआ नाना। मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अल-फातिहा।
Right now we'll have a quick presentation from Brother Abdul Rahman Husseini. Please invite him with an out salawat.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Jazakallah khair for inviting me here to speak to you. Inshallah, today I'm going to be speaking about planning for the unexpected, although it's expected for all of us, introduction to estate planning in Florida. I'm an attorney. My name is Abdul Rahman Husseini. I work for the Husseini law firm. There's my contact information, inshallah. Go to the next slide. So this is basic estate planning presentation. Okay, I got it. Jazakallah khair. A basic estate planning questionnaire. Why do I need a will? This is a question that many of us have. A lot of us, we haven't thought about this, even though we're seeing a lot of death around us, etc. Why do I need a will? Why is it important to do so? The problem is if you pass away without having a will, you leave a mess for your family. First of all, you didn't leave any instructions for what they should do after you pass away. We have in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran told us what we should do. And so when we don't write something here in the United States that says what we want, which is what Allah told us to do, we're allowing the state to make that decision for us. So we have no control over who inherits. The relatives, charities, friends, etc. And what you will be stuck with is what the state statutes say that who's going to inherit. The second thing is control over who administers the estate. So when you pass away, you need someone to take care of your properties, etc. There can be, and I've seen a lot of arguments between family members as to who's going to administer the estate, what should be done with the property, whether it should be sold or kept, etc. So not having a will kind of puts your family in that position where they don't know what to do, and they have no control. Also, possible reduced costs. Again, like I said, not having a will usually leads to a lot of fighting between family members and leads to problems in administering the estate. And then you can also structure benefits. If you have a minor or disabled beneficiary, you're able to structure their plan and appoint a guardian for minor children in your will. Again, if you pass away, you and your wife pass away and you have minor children, the state gets to decide who is going to be the person who's going to be their guardian if you did not specify that. So it's very important for everybody to really think about these things, because again, we usually put them to the side and we don't think about them. What are the goals of estate planning? So the main goal of why you do some estate planning is to avoid probate. And what is probate? Probate is a legal process in which the court determines whether or not the will that you wrote is valid, or distributes a person's property if they died without a will. Again, like I said, the court would decide, the state would decide if you die without a will, whether or not, what happens. The court would appoint the executor if you did not appoint that in your will, and it would find the creditors and pay the debts, they would pay the income and estate taxes, and they would distribute the assets. Probate is a very, very costly process, and it takes a lot of time. It takes minimum 6 months, usually years sometimes, to finish a probate case. So that's one of the reasons why you would want to not just have a will, and we'll talk about it a little later, you'd want to also have a trust. So why is having a will a minimum requirement for Muslims and having a plan? The Quran lays out the requirements for inheritance in Surah An-Nisa and Surah Al-Baqir. And just for time's sake, men shall have a share in what their parents and closest relatives leave, and women shall have a share in what their parents and closest relatives leave, whether the legacy be small or large. This is ordained by Allah, nasiban mafruda. This is ordained by Allah. So this is a fard, to follow Allah's nasib, what He has chosen for who inherits what. Again, faridatan min Allah, inna Allah kana aliman hakima. This is Allah from Allah, and He is all-knowing, wise. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He told us what to do in the Quran, how to distribute the assets, and He's all-knowing and wise. And being here in a country that allows us to write our own will, write our own trusts, that's something that we really should do. Now, again, we talked about avoiding probate. The reason why you want to avoid probate is just the attorney's fees, never mind the court costs, the appraiser costs, and all of this other stuff. Let's say you had a $500,000 house, and you left an estate of $500,000. The probate, just the attorney's fees, would cost you about $15,000, and that is just the attorney's fees. So how can we avoid probate? You create a living trust and you put your property into that living trust. In that living trust, you are the grantor and the settler, and you would act as your own trustee while you're alive. And once you pass away, you appoint a successor trustee, and that successor trustee takes care of your property for you without having to go to court. Takes care of the trust property for you. And it substitutes for a will. The advantage, you avoid probate, you avoid guardianship proceedings, it's easy to administer, you don't have to go to court, and reduced cost of administration, only the cost of selling the property, etc. So if you leave a legacy, or if you leave a property of $500,000, like I said, a house, etc., going through probate would cost you minimum $15,000. If you have a living trust, the only cost would be the cost of selling the property. And the other thing with the living trust is a will actually becomes public record once you go through probate. It gets filed with the court. A living trust is actually private. It's private, and timing issues would be that it's very quick to it's very quick to administer a trust. You can administer a trust right after the death. You don't have to wait those months and months of probate. There's other types of wills called a living will and a healthcare power of attorney. It allows a doctor or agent to make healthcare decisions. This is also another important thing. If you are admitted to a hospital and you are incapacitated, unable to make decisions, you have these documents that would appoint someone to be able to make those decisions for you, and that includes life support decisions. It supplements a will or a trust. Typical estate plans outside, I've surveyed attorneys, they usually charge between $1,000 and $1,500 for a simple estate plan with a simple will. And remember, as I said, a will by itself will not avoid probate. You will actually have to go through probate. A typical estate plan with a revocable trust is between $2,500 and $3,000. Some attorneys charge way more, some attorneys charge less. But again, when we talk about how much savings that you would have going through probate process, going through court, and the value of your assets, it's definitely a drop in the bucket for that. And then what about online forms, online wills? What if I just find a will online and do it? The problem with these document providers or these do-it-yourself wills is that they're not usually state-specific, they're not person-specific, and every situation is different, and every person's family is different. And a lot of times, simple mistakes that people can make the entire will invalid. And I just wanted to do this small 10-minute introduction, and inshallah I'll be available in the next session for questions and answers. Jazakumullah khairan.
Thank you very much, brother. The session will take place after the main program, after the tea break. Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen in Kul Arwah al-Mu'mineen wal-Mu'minat Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayat-e Yajibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Now let us invite Sayyid to come forward to recite tonight's majlis per Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. بسم الله. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد مؤمنين مؤمنات brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we are commemorating the Shahada of an Imam whom we famously know him as the one who opened and split open the doors of the ulum, of knowledge. Normally when we think about the fifth Imam and the sixth Imam specifically, sometimes they're known as Baqirain or Sadiqain. We usually talk about it in the sense of because the Abbasids and Umayyads were fighting amongst themselves, fighting for power, both of these Imams had the opportunity to increase the level of ilm and ulum and ma'rifah and knowledge in the ummah, no matter what that person's background was. So generally we have this idea in the back of our heads that, so these Imams were left alone by the Khulafa at that time, by the Zalimeen. They were left alone, so they were able to go ahead and teach. And as we mentioned during, I think a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, we talked about how at the time of the sixth Imam, that wasn't necessarily true. He was still being spied on. He was under house arrest for much of his life. And this idea that we sometimes hear of, these Imams were okay, especially in the middle. Relatively speaking, compared to the other Imams, yeah, maybe that's true. But that doesn't mean that they were free in the sense that you and I would be free right now to teach or attend classes, things like that. And this is specifically the case as well with the fifth Imam, which inshallah we'll be mentioning later. When we talk about the fact that this Imam Muhammad ibn Ali Al-Baqir al-Ulum alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil. When we say that, he opened and split open the doors of knowledge. We've been talking for the past few weeks now about how we need to gain more ma'rifah about our own deen, about Islam, so that when the Imam returns, inshallah, we're not caught in the crossfire. We want to make sure our Islam, our Iman is intact, so that we're not tricked by false prophets and false messengers. So we had to make sure that our aqidah is sound, our belief system is sound. Sometimes people think that that means we can just read a bunch of books or listen to lectures, get a bunch of raw data and information, learn some things, and as long as I know what Islam says, that'll be enough for me, right? I know the ins and outs of Islam, about Tawheed, Nabuwa, Wilaya, all that, I know it, and that's enough. But if we pay attention, especially to the words of this Imam, then we'll see that that might be enough for Islam, but that's not enough for Iman. And there is a difference. So what do we have from the words of our Imam? He says, Al-Iman iqrarun wa amal. Iqrar meaning you testify, you state it, you believe it, wa amal, and you have to act upon it as well. That's Iman. On the other hand, wal Islam iqrarun bila amal. The lower level is actually Islam. See, a Muslim is very simple. They can say, yeah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah, and they're done. That's it. I believe this stuff, and I can completely act contrary to everything within the tenets of Islam. And then you can still technically be a Muslim, right? If they say, I believe in God, and I believe in Rasulullah, and let's say they are adulterers, they openly drink, they're fasiqeen, every single sin that's there, let's say they go through every single one of them, technically, they're not outside the fold of Islam. They're still a Muslim or a Muslimah. I mean, barely, but they're still one. But Iman Having that strong faith in your heart means that you take that Islam and now you're manifesting it. Now you're acting upon it because it's something that's real inside your soul. It's something real inside your heart. And that's what I want to talk about tonight in honor of our fifth Imam, is to see, especially since we are going to be talking about this concept of death, about writing wills, about inheritance, as Brother Abdul Rahman beautifully had introduced us to. And we want to look at some of the words and advices from the fifth Imam himself and, of course, Rasulullah, specifically talking about how we have to give that sort of importance to death. Now, for a lot of us, we might jump right to it that, okay, that means we got to write wills. Okay, let's just slow down, right? That might be definitely where we want to end up to. We need that action. But sometimes the reason we don't end up performing these actions, I mean, we all know that we need to write wills. I think everybody knows that. They should have one. Or maybe we don't. Maybe we have to go through that too. So it might be worth stating at the onset, is it actually wajib to write a will? Technically, no. There's nothing in the Sharia that really says you have to write a will. But here's the issue. Because a lot of people from the East, they may say, look, our forefathers never wrote wills, and they never had any issues. And you might be right. If you're coming from an Islamic country, a place that's ruled by Islamic law, or even a country that honors Islamic law, like India, which is not an Islamic country, but the courts will honor Islamic law, and they will specifically divide between Sunni and Shia law as well, right? Their lawyers are supposed to be trained in both laws. So if a Muslim dies there and they don't have a will, they will divide everything according to what Islam says in a Muslim country or even a place like India that honors that. But what happens when we're over here? In a place that doesn't really care about your Islam, or as they say, your Sharia law, right? They don't care about that. In fact, most people, not just that they don't care about it, but that they hate it. So the last thing the government is going to want to do on your behalf is, fulfill your Islamic obligations. They don't care. And I've seen many, many terrible horror stories, right? So many of you know I'm from New Jersey. So over there, we had some sessions with some lawyers there. And they explained to us how, we're supposed to make sure that when our will is written, how it's supposed to be written so that it can be in line with what, the state of New Jersey says. Inshallah, we'll learn more about that after the majlis. But unfortunately, even after all this advice, after all this, push for the community members to do that, not everybody really picked up on it. They're like, yeah, I'll get to it one day. But they didn't. And I've seen many, many horror stories. One example I'll give you. One individual, because his parents, it was a good friend of mine, his parents didn't write down anything, right? So they owned a house. Because of all the legal issues that happened, basically, the father passed away very early on. The mother, I believe she had some serious terminal illness and was pretty much incapacitated. After both the father and the mother had passed away, the son just assumed that the state was going to give him the house. Like, oh, it's mine, right? This was my parents' house, it's going to come to me. But the state of New Jersey had something else to say about that, and they took the house. He didn't get a dime from his parents, not one dime, and was completely left alone. Nothing. Again, a Shia brother that I know from New Jersey. And they fought and fought all these legal battles. Nothing really came up out of it. Why? Because, again, there was an assumption that everything was just going to work out. But the government says, as we all know, they're going to make it work out for their own purpose, not for us. They're not looking out for you and I. They're looking out for themselves. Whatever they can pocket, whatever they can take care of, they'll take care of. Islam has given us the right in certain amounts of our wealth, for at least our wills. We have the right to 1/3 of it. 1/3 of it we can designate pretty much anywhere we want. Yes, the other 2/3 have to go to what Allah says, but 1/3 of it we get to do whatever we want. Whether that means you want to even it out. Maybe you have both sons and daughters, and maybe you want to even out that inheritance. Well, you can use that 1/3, the haqq that you have there, and maybe you can even it out or balance it out. Maybe you want to, if you have enough, you can give more to your daughter than your sons if you want. Or maybe you want to balance it out so your wife gets more, right? There's basically that 1/3 allows you to pretty much do anything that you want. Maybe you don't like your kids so much, I don't know, maybe you want to give it to somebody else. Then there's a lot of options that you have. Allah has given you this right, so we don't want to squander that right. We want to make sure that we use that. And since Allah has given us that right, we want to make sure that somebody else doesn't come up, like the government, the state, on our behalf, and to start taking away these things and taking away our right, our ability, our haqq, and our wazifa, our duty to be able to give out what we, and many of us, Allah has given us the tawfiq to earn over all these years and give out and spend on those things which are Hasan, which are good for us to spend on. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Some of us, the reason we don't end up going to the idea of wills, even though we know it's on there, it's because thinking about death itself is a little scary for us. When we think about that idea, who wants to leave this place? Especially those of you and those of us who are doing fairly well and we're comfortable. We don't want to think about death. A lot of us, we think about it, and sometimes there's even a cultural taboo. I've heard many elders sometimes when the idea of a will or inheritance or anything regarding the D word, death, or M or meme, moth, it comes out, people start saying, no, shh, don't talk about that. Let's not talk about that, it's not good. Almost as if you talk about it, somebody's just going to die in the gathering. That's the way people act. They're so afraid. You see, a person who's attached to the dunya, they're going to be afraid to talk about death. And this we see within the narrations. Here's one from Imam Al-Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad wa ajil farjahum. And he advises us, or in a sense commands us, he says, أكثر ذكر الموت, or أكثر ذكر الموت. Increase your remembrance of death, ذكر الموت. Do it more often. Why? فإنه لم يكثر إنسان ذكر الموت إلا زهد في الدنيا. Because the only thing that it's going to do, if you keep on remembering death constantly, increase it over and over again, the only consequence is going to be that you're going to be pulled away from the dunya. You're going to become a zahid. You're going to be somebody that's, you're going to be cut off. You're not going to care so much about the dunya. And that's exactly what we'd like, right? If you have that connection to the dunya, then death is not something you want to talk about. And the Imam is giving us the other side. Think about death more often, and that'll help you pull away from the dunya. In a sense, what we always also see is another narration that the fifth Imam is actually narrating from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farjahum. And it's regarding wills and inheritance and death itself, but Rasulullah seems to explain it a bit more about how, in a person's life, what would the practical effects be, right? Because some might say, okay, I think I might die, I'm going to die any moment. Okay, if I do that a lot, what actual effects should be in my life? In this, Rasulullah actually mentioned something, which is a hadith Qudsi as well. So Rasulullah is narrating it from Allah. He's saying this is something that Allah is saying. This is قال Allah, إن من أبغض الأولياء عندي. So, without a doubt, absolutely, amongst the awliya, right, the kind of best friends of Allah, the ones that are nearest to Allah, he's saying, the one that I'm most pleased with, رجلا خفيف الحال ذا خطر. The one that Allah is most pleased with is somebody who, whenever they're faced or they're confronted with something that's dangerous, whenever they're in a kind of sticky situation, they're just easygoing, right? They're chill. They're just they're composed. And think about it. If you have somebody that's just thinking about death constantly, then one little dunyawi, mishap takes place, it's not going to be a big deal for them. They're like, yeah, my mind's on another dimension, on another world. This stuff is not a big deal, right? This is temporary for me, not a big deal. If it's the other way around, if this is our main place, if we're thinking about this place constantly, death is, far, far away for us. Akhirah is something that's imaginary for us, right? It's a fairy tale. Then obviously, one little issue, whether it's health or wealth or anything like that, yeah, it's going to freak us out. And we're not going to be composed. We're going to get stressed out. We're going to get anxious. But for somebody the other way around, if death is the norm for them, if they're thinking about, again, where they're going, their long term, one little thing, okay, I got COVID, whatever, no big deal. I got sick, whatever. Alhamdulillah, not a problem. Oh, somebody in my family passed away, alhamdulillah, right? These sort of issues are not a big deal for them because this is not their final stop. Allah continues. So that's one quality Allah mentions. The next, about what somebody who's Allah is very, very pleased with, besides that, the second quality is أحسن عبادتي ربي في الغيب. The best ibadah that he does, the most beautiful ibadah, is not something out in the open. It's not when he comes to the center or she comes to the center. It's fil ghayb. When that person, when that Muslim or Muslimah or mu'min or mu'minah, when they're in private, when they're at home, even away from their family, that's when their best ibadah takes place for their Rabb. A lot of us, we save, our best recitations and our best clothing and all that stuff for when we come to the center. It's almost like, we want to show off our spirituality. Allah is saying, look, the one that I'm most pleased with is the one who saves up all of that spiritual energy for me and for me alone. Nobody else witnesses that but Allah, but that Rabb. So we have to really think about it, right? Okay, we have all these mustahab a'mal and salawat and nawafil and all those things. And yeah, sometimes we have these things, at the center. That's wonderful. How many of these things are we actually performing at home though? If there was nothing at the center, would we actually perform it at home on our own or not? What does that tell us about our own spirituality? That's something worth thinking about. That's the second quality. The third thing that is mentioned, وَكَانَ غَامِضًا فِي النَّاسِ. That this individual, in addition, is ghamid. Ghamid is basically ambiguous. He's like hidden, almost like he's like behind a cloud, like foggy. Nobody really knows who he is. So we have some people, on the other hand, who are very, very well known, and they make sure that they're very well known, right? Their name is out there. They want to make sure everybody knows who they are. If they ever do something, they want to make sure their name is coming out so people recognize what they've done and what they're doing, right? They make sure that people recognize what's going on. Allah's saying, look, the people that I really, really love are the ones, they're really unknown. People don't really know them. And you might think, well, what if they do good things? That's fine. But remember, the previous one was that the best things that these individuals are doing are in private anyway. You can have public and private acts, that's fine. But the best things need to be reserved for private. That's the only way you can really show if you have sincerity or not. If the best actions are outside, then perhaps that's saying that you're doing it for everybody else. If the best actions, your best ibadah is within, meaning in private, then that's a clue to show us that it's sincerity. We're doing it for Allah's sake only. Next quality, جَعَلَ رِزْقُهُ كَفَافًا. The rizq that Allah has provided him is kafi. It's enough for him. He's not going out and freaking out and searching for more. I need more money, I need more this and that. No. Whatever Allah's provided for me, that's it. I'm good to go. Whatever I get, now doesn't mean you don't try, obviously. But whatever rizq has been provided, the person is satisfied with that. فَصَبَرَ عَلَيْهِ مَاتَ. When it comes to death, when this person dies, they're in a state of sabr. Even at those final moments, they, again, are not in a state of where they're freaking out or anxious or anything. And then the final parts. فَقَلَّ تُرَاثُ. His inheritance is actually very little. Now you might say, why would that be the case? Why would Allah love somebody whose inheritance is very little? Well, we may understand this from other sorts of narrations. You see, some people, they save up every single little penny that they have, and then when they die, that's when everything kind of gets dispersed, right? And they think that they're doing a good thing, which may be a good thing. But there are other individuals who they're collecting during their lifetime, but while they're alive, they're giving everything out. And we have this same style of narration. I believe it's also from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. When he was informed that, somebody, this great individual had passed away, and he had left all these dates to been given out to the mu'mineen. He's like, okay, alhamdulillah, that's wonderful that after this person died, they gave it out. Alhamdulillah, that's fine. If he had given just one, or even half of these dates while he was alive, it would have been better for his soul. Because look, while we're here, our soul's attached to it, right? It's here, I could use this right now. When you're dead, what good is that money to you? Of course it's going to be divided and sent out. So perhaps one of the ideas here is that if you don't have much to give out, that's possibly because you were giving it out while you were alive. And you have people like that. I've met many, even in this community and other communities, who they say, you know what, when I have extra money on me, extra wealth, my hands get itchy. Like I don't like having that extra, I just have to go and give it out. So they go and find an excuse to, this sadaqah or this zakat, or I have to go and make sure it's going to some project. They don't like having that extra amount there. Now, we don't have to take it to extremes, obviously, but even the ma'asumeen, alayhimus salam, when they would go out and have their day's work, right? Let's say, for example, they earn, 10 dirham in a day. For example, I'm just giving some random number, right? 10 dirham. On their way home, before they reach home, they would end up giving almost everything out except for exactly what they needed to feed their family for that day. Because they say, look, my next day is not guaranteed. So what I will do is secure what I need for this day, and then Allah will provide me what I need for tomorrow. I don't want to go home with any extra, because if I have any extra when I go home, perhaps Allah will call me to question for that. Do we really want to be questioned by Allah of all this extra stuff that we've accumulated that we didn't use, that we've just stuck around with, right? As we say, to say, oh, I've got this huge bank account, I have all this stuff at my disposal. Well, you have all this stuff at your disposal. It's a barakah, that's wonderful. But what about all these individuals who are really struggling? who would really benefit from all that extra that you've been given. They've been deprived a lot and you've been given a lot. There's a way that we can right now reach that sort of financial economic equilibrium if we were able to give that little bit of extra that we had out. And the final thing that he says here, which I won't have time to explain, but I'll just mention it, something for you to think about. The final quality is وَقَلَّ بَوَاكِهِ. So the last quality that Allah is saying of the most pleasing people to Allah is that in addition to this person not having much inheritance to give out when they die, is that at the time of their death, at their janazah, when they're being buried, there's very, very few people crying for him, or crying for them. Now we might say, why is that the case? Because when you have mu'mineen and mu'minat and ulama, like a lot of people come and they cry. Again, this is something that's a bit deeper, so I'll leave it for you to think about, and maybe, inshallah, some other time, we will talk about this. Now, I want to mention a few things about the importance of writing a will. And again, I'll give you two narrations, which also come from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And we mentioned the points before, but just to strengthen it and to emphasize it through the hadith. So this first one from Rasulullah says, Al-wasiyya haqqun ala kulli muslim. The wasiyya, meaning writing a will, decreeing what you want to happen after you die, is a haqq. It's a right, in fact, an obligation on every single Muslim. And on the other side, right, that's like the more positive side. But Rasulullah is also giving you the negative side in case you need that guilt and that shaming too. He says, Al-mahrum man hurim al-wasiyya. Person who is, a mahrum, who's deprived, is the one who has kind of made it forbidden on themselves or has deprived themselves of writing a wasiyya. So we look at both sides. He's saying, look, on one side it's a haqq, it's a right, it's an obligation. You get this freedom to be able to give out this 1/3, to write down what you want. Who do you want to execute your will? Who do you want to lead your salah? Who do you want to read your majlis? What do you want to be done? You have all this right to say these things. And these are things that we should be doing. On the other hand, if you don't do that, somebody else might come along and do things that you don't like. And I don't like to mention these things, but unfortunately, I've had enough experience in communities where I've seen Muslim family members fighting over these simple sort of things. Which alim is going to lead the Salatul Janazah? Fights among family members. Oh, dad's favorite, Abu's favorite alim was this, so we have to fly this person in. No, he would never want to spend that much money, just take the local person. They're going to fight all over this stuff. Okay, what kind of tombstone should we get? What kind of this? What kind of that? They're all arguing and fighting about all of these things. If the father or the mother had just written these things down clearly, then there wouldn't have been an argument. And this is among, and I'm telling you, because I know these families personally, among siblings and relatives who were all loving and all close. They were eating together and visiting each other, family reunions, all happy and smiling. Unfortunately, it's not nice to say, but we have to think about this. When it comes to people and loved ones passing away, and when it comes to spending money on their behalf, things change very, very quickly. We have to be preemptive about this. People have even asked me, like one of the best pieces of advice is, both of my parents have passed away. And people have asked me, what's a good piece of advice? I said, look, discuss these things with your parents ahead of time. Alhamdulillah, with both of them, we had our discussions because they generally had an idea about their time passing, right? And having those discussions ahead of time, knowing, okay, they would like it this way, this way, this way, made it so much easier for our siblings, made it so much easier for us. On the other hand, when you see siblings who things are not clear, or one sibling says, well, Baba said this. Somebody else says, no, Baba, when we went to Hajj together, he told me he wants to do this. No, who are you going to believe? Are you going to get some qadi and some judge to come and argue? You don't want stuff like this. Somebody just passed away in your family and you want to go to, in Islam. Well, you don't have an Islamic court really here, right? But what do you want to do about this, right? What, do you want to get a Florida state judge involved? I don't think you want that as well, right? These are just nasty, dirty things. When we preemptively do this, when we write these things down ahead of time, very, very clearly, it'll save us a huge, huge mess. It'll save us a headache, and it'll save us future problems that could possibly happen between family members. Let's look at some of the words of encouragement and also some, let's call it, again, guilting and shaming, also from Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam. And he's talking about individuals who, it's not just about the idea of writing the will, because we talked about that importance, but the specifications about what you want to do in that will. You have to make sure that you are doing it within what is within your rights, and you are not oppressing other people while you're doing this as well. So Imam Ali, in a few narrations, one says, "Ma ubali adarartu biwuldi, o saraqtuhum dhalik al-mal." He says, look, I see absolutely no difference between somebody who harms or injures or oppresses or messes with their children. So I see no difference between that, meaning in the will, right? So some person writes their will and they end up ruining one of their family members' lives or their child's life because of the way they wrote their will. Maybe mistakenly, or they didn't write something correctly, or they oppressed them somehow. Imam is saying, I see no difference between that sort of individual and a thief who steals money. Meaning the Imam is equating a person who's incorrectly or negligently writing their will with a thief who's stealing money. That's what you're doing. It's your own money. It's your mal. That 1/3 that you have the right of, it's your own money. But if you don't use it the way that Islam has recommended you to do that, the Imam is saying basically it's like you're stealing from somebody. So we have to be very, very careful. On the other hand, he's saying, "Man awsa walam yahif walam yudar kana kaman tasaddaqa bihi fi hayati." So somebody who actually does what they're supposed to do, they properly, delegate and do the taqseem and divide up all of their wealth in the way that it should be divided properly in their will, the way that it should be done. He said it's like you have given sadaqah in your life as well. So remember, we said that we don't want to accumulate too much wealth, obviously, because if we do that, then we have all this leftover stuff. Then we won't be the kind of best in Allah's eyes. But at the same time, if whatever amount we might end up with towards the end of our life, if we make sure we delineate that properly, then Imam is saying basically it's like you've given sadaqah during your life. Because that amount, and I've seen this happen to other family members as well, when it's written properly, and they take care of both their immediate nuclear family and then their extended family, especially when that person uses that 1/3 right that they have, and they divide it up in a way that makes sense for their family, right? Because maybe one of the children has, 6-7-figure job. Like, okay, so now, even that's the case, let me use this 1/3 to kind of offset that, because maybe they don't need that. Or what that a father or mother may do is during their lifetime, they will sit down with their children, or if their parents are still alive, or grandparents, or brothers and sisters, whoever's alive, who may fall into those categories, they'll sit down with them and say, look, we all know your situations. Let's agree to a proper distribution of these funds that makes sense for our family breakdown. I've seen some families do this, right? Where generally we know that in most cases, it's the sons that will get more than the daughters, in some cases, or most cases at least. But because of certain family dynamics, maybe the daughter is making more. It's possible, right? So sometimes the siblings will get together with the parents and they'll list everything out about exactly how they want it, distributed, so that everybody's in agreement. And these things you can do, right? There's these shortcut ways of writing these things down. So these are the types of things that we would want to do in our life. And if we don't do that, then the way that we are going to be ending our life, according to our fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad Al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farjahum. In this narration he says, "Man lam yusi 'inda mawtihi lidhawi qurabati," a person who does not properly write their will and designate things at their time of their death, or even before that obviously, to not just their close family, but their extended family as well, the one who doesn't do this properly, مِمَّنْ لَا يَرَثُهُ فَقَدْ خَتَمَ عَمَلَهُ بِمَعْصِيَةٍ. So the person who doesn't write this stuff properly for their close family members or extended ones, and is not really, especially for the ones who normally wouldn't inherit from them, this person, it's as if they have sealed the end of their life with ma'asiyah. So this person is about to die when they are not delegating this stuff properly, especially for those who are extended family members who may not normally inherit, meaning they're going to be doing their extended family an injustice. The Imam's basically saying here that a person is basically sealing their life and saying, you know what, I want to stamp my life. Before I die, I want to end up with ma'asiyah, with sin on my shoulders. This is how much importance that the Ma'asumin alayhimus salam have put on not just thinking about death, not just writing a will, and as we've seen in other narrations, right, keeping it under our pillow or making sure it's written down. Not just that, but making sure we are just in the way that we write it. And inshallah, after the majlis is finished, we will continue on with the session. Slido will be open if anybody has any particular questions. we'll be taking them at that point as well because there's a lot more to go through. So inshallah, we'll discuss it at that point. If you can recite another salawat, ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I want to end with just a story from the life of Imam Baqir alayhi salam before we move on to the musibah and ghabbayan. As we said in the beginning, Imam Baqir, we might think of him as, somebody who had the freedom to say what he wanted and go and teach these classes and teach individuals. That's what we have in our mind. But this wasn't the case. He was being harassed by the zalimeen of the time, by the khulafa, especially Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, one of the khulafa of that time. He had, of course, just like most of these khulafa did, he had a hate for the imam. So many of us don't know that. We know that the later imams, they were pulled away from their homes, right? Pulled from Medina, for example, and taken to Iran or Baghdad or other areas. The same thing had happened during the time of Hisham while Imam Baqir was alive. Hisham had this hate for the imam and wanted to disgrace the imam in front of the Muslims. So he told the governor of Medina, he said, make this Muhammad al-Baqir and his son, force them to come to Sham. So even Imam al-Baqir was forced away from his home for some period of time. Many of us don't know this. Even this imam was taken away and forced to go to Sham. And as he was taken to Sham, there's many incidents that took place on the way and then while the imam was there. And Hisham's main objective was to try his best to taunt, insult, and demean and put the imam in an undignified state. But of course, you can't do that to the member of the Ahlul Bayt. It's impossible. And the imam always turned it around back onto Hisham. For example, one of the tactics Hisham wanted to employ is to say, look, he wanted to show the Muslims that, look, all these religious people, they might be great at talking about fatwas and fiqh and laws and spirituality and all that, but when it comes to real Arab stuff, the stuff that makes somebody a man or somebody, to become a politician or a warrior, these guys don't know anything. When it comes to the dunya, these people don't know anything. Right? We still have people like that right now, whether they talk about the Ahlul Bayt or the prophets like this. And sometimes they talk about ulama like this. Like, these people, when they go and study, they don't know anything about the real world. All they know is a bunch of laws and, be a good person. They don't know anything about the real world, right? We still hear these sorts of ideas as well. So Hisham wanted to do this and show this to the Muslims, right? He wanted to put the imam in an undignified situation. So he said, you know what? One of the major sort of ways to kind of show off your skills was to show your skills in archery. So what Hisham had done is he had organized a simple little archery contest. So first thing he had done is when he brought the imam to Sham, he made the imam wait for 3 days first. He didn't allow him to come to the palace. He said, no, you sit there and wait for 3 days. Again, in a way very undignified. When you have a guest of honor, you bring them to you right away. But he said, no, I can make him wait. Again, to try to show people I don't really care about this person at all. After 3 days, he says, okay, fine, you can come to the palace. Immediately, or before the imam comes, he already has all the bullseyes and targets set up. Now all the dart players are kind of tuning in right now, right? So he has everything set up, and all the best archers of Sham are sitting there, and they're shooting their arrows. So the imam comes in. And, Hisham's like, again, trying to make it seem like this guy, look, these guys are just shooting arrows. Hey, give this guy a bow. Let him try it out. Ya ibn Rasulullah, you're so great. We love you. Here, please, show us how amazing you are, right? He's really trying to butter him up so that he can bring him down as well. So the imam, he tries to give Hisham a way out. He says, look, I'm too old for these things. Just excuse me. He tried to give Hisham a way out, right? See, this is something that we see with the Ma'sumin. They didn't always jump to trying to insult and put even their enemies in an insulting place or an undignified place. They tried to show them mercy as well. So look, I'm about to embarrass you, but I'd rather not do that. I'd rather show you mercy because we are following the same seerah of our grandfather Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So he says, I'm old, I'm too old for this stuff now, just leave me be. He's like, no, please, we insist, we want to see, and this and that. And Hisham is like, yeah, now, they gave him the bow, they force him. So see, now this old guy's going to try to pull it, it's going to fall, everybody's going to laugh at him and say, see, this guy's not, he's nothing special. Now, of course, you guys know exactly what happened. So the Imam says, okay, if you insist. First arrow, pulls back, bullseye. And he's like, oh, mashallah, nice shot, alhamdulillah. Second arrow, right through the first one. Third, right through the next one. 9 arrows in a row, every single one, splitting each and every arrow. At this point, Hisham's like, wow, we had no idea. Because now he's sweating, like, what am I going to do? I can't say anything. So Hisham is sweating about this. This is the kind of stuff that the Khulafa, people like Hisham, had done constantly to try to undermine the status and level of the Ahlul Bayt. But in every single situation, even when it came to these quote-unquote worldly matters, the Ahlul Bayt said that, look, and they showed in every single thing, because Allah is the one who has divinely appointed us, we have the knowledge of the unseen. We have knowledge of what is cause and effect. And when Allah wants us to show our right here, when Allah wants to show us our haqq and to put our hujjah on you, then even when it comes to hitting a bullseye, we'll hit that bullseye as well. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So this idea of knowledge is not just about philosophy and laws and akhlaq and things like that. It's even about worldly matters as well, even when it's something like this. But on the topic of inheritance, it's not just physical things or financial things that are inherited. There are other things that people inherit as well, especially the ma'asumin. In addition to inheriting the ulum and knowledge of their forefathers, of Rasulullah, of the previous imams, we see that the Ahlul Bayt had also inherited and become the warith of the bala and the gham of their forefathers as well. A lot of times when we think about the musibah in Karbala, our mind jumps to Zainab, our mind jumps to Hussein, and our mind jumps to Imam Sajjad. And we think about the trials and tribulations that they had to go through. Normally, in the nights of Muharram, on the night that we dedicate to Habib ibn Mudahir, we talk about how Habib, when his son, when he found out that his father was killed in Karbala, his son comes out in the streets of Kufa and he sees his father's head on a spear. And when he goes, he grabs a few of his friends. They go and they fight the soldiers who had Habib's head. They take the head of his father. And now the son of Habib has his father's head in his hands and he's crying and he's wailing and he's slapping himself saying, Ya abata, oh father, this is not fair. This is no way to treat a son. A son should never see his father in a state like this. And our ulama remind us that Imam Sajjad is walking very close in that same way and say, what about Imam Sajjad, who has to now, from Karbala to Kufa, from Kufa to Sham, the whole way that he's walking, in front of him, he's looking at the head of his father on a spear as well. This is the reminders that we give to ourselves. But I remind you now, and I ask you, what about the 3-year-old Imam Al-Baqir who's watching his own father look at his grandfather as well? What would be going through the mind of Imam Baqir when he's looking at his father Imam Sajjad as Imam Sajjad is looking at the head of Imam Hussein? Imagine what a 3-year-old is thinking about when he sees Imam Sajjad being whipped by Shimr over and over and over again. A 3-year-old child, do you know what would break, how the heart of a child would break when their father is being oppressed, when their father is being attacked and there's nothing they can do? When we see that Imam Baqir is performing the ghusl on his father, when he's doing this, they say that there were red marks that he saw on the shoulders. They were saying that he saw the marks finally that Imam Sajjad was hiding from him. He said that when people were asking, what are these marks on the shoulders? What are these marks on the neck of your father? Imam Baqir told the Shia, he said that these marks on his neck were from when the people of Umar ibn Sa'd, when they took that chain and they put these thorns inside of the collar of the neck of my father, and they put it inside so that it was protruding, so that every time he would move his head up or down, it would cut his neck, so that that metal would heat up and it would burn his neck over and over again. They would tie his hands and his ankles so tight that it would leave marks whenever he would try to move. Whenever he would move slowly on the camel, they would whip him to move faster and faster and faster. Even with all this, this is what Imam Baqir had to see as a young child. Imam Baqir has to walk through the lifetime with his father through the bazaar in Medina. And when he sees his father going to the bazaar, when his father stops at a butcher and he says, "Oh butcher, when you slaughtered this goat, when you slaughtered this cow, did you give this cow water? Did you give this goat water? He says, of course, it's a sunnah of our Rasulullah. It's an order from Rasulullah that whenever we slaughter an animal, of course we give it water. Imam Sajjad tells him that, you know, my father was killed without one drop of water. Imagine Imam Baqir listening to all these words of this. Imagine Imam Baqir knowing that his own puppo, Sakina, was there in Karbala without a drop of water as well. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری نہ ہوتی، شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری نہ ہوتی، شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری ہوتی، مظلوم کی دنیا میں، مظلوم کی دنیا میں طرفداری نہ ہوتی، شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری نہ ہوتی، شبیر اگر عزاداری نہ ہوتی، شبیر کا مقصد جو سمجھ لیتا زمانہ، شبیر کا مقصد جو سمجھ لیتا زمانہ، قرآن کو سمجھنے میں، قرآن کو سمجھنے میں یہ دشواری نہ ہوتی، شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری نہ ہوتی، شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری نہ ہوتی، کیا فائدہ آنکھوں کا رہ جاتا ذرا سوچو، ان آنکھوں میں مولا کی، ان آنکھوں میں مولا کی جو غم خواری نہ ہوتی، شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری نہ ہوتی، شبیر تیری عزاداری نہ ہوتی، شبیر کے روزے پہ کچھ روز جو رہتے، شبیر کے روزے پہ کچھ روز جو رہتے، تم کو کبھی جنت کی، تم کو کبھی جنت کی طلبگاری نہ ہوتی، شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری نہ ہوتی، شبیر عزاداری دو روز بھی جنت میں رہنا ہمیں مشکل تھا، دو روز بھی جنت میں رہنا ہمیں مشکل تھا، زہرا تیرے بچوں کی، زہرا تیرے بچوں کی جو سرداری نہ ہوتی، شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری نہ ہوتی، شبیر عزاداری نہ ہوتی. غازی تیرے جیسا جو علمدار نہ ہوتا. غازی تیرے جیسا جو علمدار نہ ہوتا. دنیا میں علم ہوتے، دنیا میں علم ہوتے، علمداری نہ ہوتی. شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری نہ ہوتی. شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری تھی. شرمندہ سکینہ سے اگر ہوتا نہ پانی. شرمندہ سکینہ سے اگر ہوتا نہ پانی. یہ رسم سبیلوں کی، یہ رسم سبیلوں کی کبھی جاری نہ ہوتی. شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری نہ ہوتی. شبیر اگر تیری عزاداری نہ ہوتی. سورۃ مبارکۃ الفاتحہ.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا حسين شهيد كربلاء. السلام عليك يا علي الحسين ابن حسين. السلام عليك يا أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا أولاد الحسين. السلام عليك يا علي زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا محمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد التقي وعلي النكي والحسن العسكري ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا بصر والزمان ألمان ألمان ألمان. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كل وليك حجة من الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ذليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك ثوى وتمتعه فيها طويلا.
اللهم صل على محمد.
Assalamu alaikum. We will inshallah continue the program at the Gents Hall. For all those ladies who are interested in attending the question answer session with Sayyid and the Orlando lawyer, Brother Abdul Rahman Zini, will be starting in approximately 5 minutes in the Gents Hall. There is a partition for the ladies to enter from the Gents Hall in the back, and then there is separate seating towards the right of the hall for all ladies who are interested in attending. Jazakallah khairan. Brothers and sisters, we will now be starting the program inside the Gents Hall, inshallah. So we can request all the brothers from the community and the sisters who are interested in listening to the question-answer session about Islamic wills with Brother Abdul Rahman Zini and Sayyid Hasan Rizvi to please come inside in the Gents Hall. Jazakallah khair. Brothers and sisters, we'll be now starting the session with Brother Abdul Rahman Zini and Sayyid Hasan Rizvi and regarding Islamic wills inside the Gents Hall. So if all ladies and gents can proceed into the Gents Hall, the seating for the ladies will be on the right and the seating for the gents will be on the left. Inshallah, we'll be starting very soon. Jazakallah khairan. Brothers and sisters, inshallah, we will be starting the question and answer session regarding Islamic wills inside the gents hall. We're requesting all sisters and gents to please come into the gents hall. There's seating on the right hand side for the ladies and seating on the left hand side for the gents. This very important session about preparing for the hereafter. Inshallah, we'll be starting momentarily with some interesting questions. Please continue to send your questions through Slido. It's at slido.com, and the code is #HICORL. We will be starting momentarily, so we'd request all the ladies and gents to please proceed into the gents hall. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you all for attending this question answer session, for those who are online and attending with us here today. Our community has had a lot of unprecedented change in the last 2 years. Specifically this summer, we had an unusual circumstance of 3 funerals in a week, which has probably forced a lot of us to think about death in a very different manner. In light of this, we are having this program tonight to sort of make the necessary preparations, and are blessed with 2 our esteemed speakers here today, Sayyid Hasan Rizvi and Brother Abdurrahman Zini. For those who don't know Brother Abdurrahman Zini, he is a practicing lawyer here in the Orlando community. A little bit on his background: he owns his own law firm, Zini Law Firm. His educational background: he has a doctorate's degree from Florida Atlantic Metropolitan University Law School after completing his undergrad at the University of Florida. He is a member of the Florida Bar and the Orange County Bar Association. He practices in areas include real estate, corporate law, Chapter 7 consumer bankruptcy law. His practices emphasize representation of business organizations and professionals. His focus is to provide his clients with prompt and practical advice on a cost-effective basis so as to facilitate their business interests and resolve problems at an early stage. Brother Rahman Zini is also a real estate broker, and some of the other areas that he practices include business, immigration and nationality law, mediation, real estate, wills, trusts, and estates. He speaks both English and Arabic. So without any further delay, Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
Okay. So I think with your permission, we'll just jump right to some of the questions that are there.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So the first one that's up there: how are joint spousal assets supposed to be handled according to the Sharia if one of the spouses dies? Do they belong to the surviving spouse, or is it 50%? Or is 50% of it distributed to the deceased spouse's heirs, or is the entire asset subject to the deceased person's will, even though it was co-owned? Just this question alone, hopefully, will get us to understand why handling this stuff now is important, because this is a mess. And this is a common issue that takes place, because people have, again, correct me anytime I make a mistake, people have an automatic assumption that assets will just magically just go to kids or go to the spouse, and it doesn't, as far as I know, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't just magically transfer to anybody. The government can, where it need be, decide where it goes. So don't just think that your assets are magically just going to travel to your spouse or to your kids like that. It doesn't work. In this situation, if you have a specific need in mind, so let's just say, for example, you and your spouse jointly own the house, right? Now, one of you dies. Now that 50%, because you haven't specifically designated it to do anything, if you don't write any wills, then pretty much
it goes to the spouse.
It's going to go to the spouse, right?
Yes.
Now, in this situation, imagine you didn't want that to be the case. Imagine you actually wanted it to be like, okay, you know what? My half that I jointly had, like, well, whatever. Well, I'm speaking to the guys here. There's 2 women there, but that's okay. So your half, you wanted to actually be split to maybe some of your kids as well. And you could have had that right if you had edited your will before that. So you have the right to adjust it as you want. Like I said, remember, there's the legal part of it that you would have to adjust, and the shar'i part you have to adjust to. So there's a few different ways you can do this. So one of them is, depending on when, if the asset, well, again, let's stick with the house. If the house is in both of your names, then that 50% is going to be split according to the Sharia, right? If you don't do anything. Now, that's the Shar'i rules. Again, I'm not talking about the legal stuff because the government can jump and do whatever they want if you haven't gotten your legal stuff settled. So it's going to be split that way. So if you wanted everything to go to your spouse, then the government seems like they would do that on their own, right? So if that's what you wanted, then technically you don't have to write that. But again, it still might be better, especially if your kids are expecting that maybe they might get something. They should know this stuff ahead of time. Now, the taxation stuff, I don't want to get into too, because there may be some tax stuff involved. What I've seen some other people do as well, again, I don't want to talk about all this tax stuff because that's a separate discussion. Some people, they will end up, see, I don't know how many like fiqh details I want to really mention over here. What some people will do in order to avoid certain issues is that they will end up gifting something during their lifetime, or they'll gift something after, or I can't really gift it afterwards, or they'll use that 1/3 right that they have and distribute it after the fact. Again, I know some of these questions that may come out will be very specific. Oh, what do I do here, here, here? The general answer is going to be this. If you have a specific idea in mind, you need to make sure that it's mentioned specifically, and then if you're going to employ a lawyer, then you need to make sure that they understand exactly what you want. There are going to be certain times where, at least in this case, the Sharia and what you want might be in line, maybe. But there's going to be, looks like the majority of the time it may not be the case, right? So we have to be very, very careful there. So let me just recap in terms of what the Sharia would say here. 50%, if you have any asset, that 50% is going to be distributed as the Sharia dictates. Now again, just to make sure we're on the same page. 2/3, you have no right over. So what's going to happen as a person dies, it comes to the Sharia, all your sort of wajib things need to be taken care of. If you have any debts, it's going to come out from there. Again, the Sharia, I'm not talking about the law, the Sharia, right? The law doesn't care if you have some debt to somebody in the community if it hasn't been done properly, right? If nobody else knows about it. So your Shar'i debts need to be paid properly. You have the wajib burial rights, they have to be paid as well from that initial amount. Now you've got left over, there's this 3/3. 2/3, Islam has already said how that stuff's going to be going to your inheritors. You don't get to decide who inherits. Inheritance is already there. In our fiqh books, you have two different books. You have the book of wills and the book of inheritance. Inheritance, it's just saying, okay, if these people are alive, this is how much they get. That's all stuff that's already been laid out, and you can find those in the fiqh books. Will is where you come in and say, I want specific things done where I have the right. So I mentioned some of the things. You want somebody to specifically lead your salah, salatul janazah, you have to mention that. You want somebody to execute your will, you have to write that down. If you want, I don't know, a specific food to be served at your janazah, some people, they have these things in mind. You want majalis to be done on your behalf, these things need to be mentioned specifically. Again, otherwise your kids or somebody else is going to come in the middle and they might mess things up for you. So these are the things you want to use. That 1/3 right you have, you can use, and now that can be spent out. So that 1/3, you can say, look, I have qada salah, I want to use that money to pay for my qada salah. Or I didn't get a chance to go on Hajj, so use that money to pay somebody to go on Hajj, something like that. You can give it to the center. You can give it a sadaqah. You get that 1/3 to decide. And I gave you other examples. If you want all that to go to your spouse that remains, you can do that. You want it to go to one of your kids. Whatever you want, that 1/3 is up to you to decide. Assuming that there's going to be actually something left over. Because maybe after all your debts are settled, you've got nothing left over. So whoever has asked that question, hopefully it makes sense. And I hope what you took away from that is make sure you get a will, right? Okay. Let's see. How do you balance, you know what, let me go to one that would make sense for you. Okay. How do you make changes to an existing will?
Okay, so there's different ways. One is you can just start from scratch and the new will overtake or get rid of the old one. That's the easiest way. If you just want to make a change to something small, there's something called a codicil, which is like an amendment to the will. The problem is if you have multiple codicils and you keep on adding different changes, it can get confusing. So it's easier and better to start from, or to do a whole new will and erase the old will.
Okay, awesome. Before I get to these, actually, this is a question that I have for myself. So, is in Florida, are we required to get a lawyer to write our will? What if I say, look, I got a document typed up, or I recorded some selfie will, and I put it out on Facebook or Instagram, whatever. Like, does that count as a will?
No. So you don't have to have a lawyer write your will. Your will, there's certain requirements that have to be met. The main thing is in the execution of the will, that it has to be in front of 2 witnesses, and those witnesses have to be disinterested, so it can't be someone who's going to inherit something, or the person that's going to be the personal representative. It has to be 2 disinterested witnesses, and in order for you not to have to bring the witnesses to court in a probate proceeding, if you do it in front of a notary public and the witnesses are sworn, that will also, it's called a self-proving affidavit, that proves the will, basically. So 2 witnesses and a notary. And then you write whatever you want. There are some things that you can't do, and there's some things that a married couple would need to do in order to avoid the will being invalidated. So like Florida law has something called you can't, first of all, you can't disinherit your spouse at all. Or you can't you're not allowed to disinherit your spouse.
Okay.
And if you're going to give your spouse less than 30%, that spouse has to basically waive that right. So,
Okay.
which in the case of the Sharia, I mean, that would probably be needed because 1/8 or 1/4 are both less than 30%. So, and that's one of the reasons why if there's a married couple and they have a trust, that can actually, and you put your assets in the trust, it helps avoid these situations because you're able to you have more leeway in a trust document than you do in a will.
Okay.
So you have a will, the will will have the burial instructions and all these other things. And then it says that I want the provisions of my trust when it comes to distribution to be followed.
Okay, Hasan. Let me go to another. I think this one's also it's going to be for you too, right?
Yeah.
How often should a will or estate plan be updated? Are there frequent changes with Florida law that require annual reviews?
So the changes are not frequent. I would say there was a big change in 2014, I believe, to the trust code. And that's why a lot of people are doing trusts now because it's definitely makes life easier. I would say it's not annual. You probably need every 5 years to look at your will again and see what. Just make sure that the people you chose are still there or still available. That because people pass away, people move. So there's those types of changes that might need to be done. So I would say every 5 years is. Yeah.
And then based on what you were saying before as well, in terms of the fact that Florida has a specific amount that they require a spouse to get.
Yeah. Unless they waive it.
Unless they waive it, right?
Yes.
So, and then again, as we're saying that, so for the Shari'i thing, then it pretty much has to be done where you're going to have some proof of it. Otherwise,
Yes.
the wife, or the spouse, I guess, right? We're talking
Yes,
about
it could be the husband, yeah.
Yeah, it could be the husband too.
Yeah.
They're going to be getting an amount that Shar'an they shouldn't be getting, right? So that means, in a sense, it almost becomes wajib for us to get involved in this and make sure that we have this stuff done properly, because otherwise it's not going to be divided. And again, it would be nice if everybody's trusting at that last moment, but it may not be the case, right? It's probably better if we have that legal documentation. Mm-hmm. Okay. How do you balance what you discussed? WRT? How do you balance what you discussed
With
respect to?
With respect to.
Thank you.
Okay.
With respect to not having more than you need for your current needs, only with having sufficient savings to help your family get through rainy days, or you not wanting to be a burden on someone else if you reach old age. So I mentioned just a few different things just to give us a different mindset. Look, we have a lot of general principles from the Ahlul Bayt. I'm not telling you all to live like the Ahlul Bayt financially. That's not my point here. Is it again, we know that they're role models, absolutely, but it doesn't mean every single little thing is something that we need to act upon as well. And we see this distinction as well. Even during the times, like Rasulullah lived one way, Imam Ali lived one way, Imam Hasan lived another way. They had different lifestyles. And they even told some of their followers, look, we do this because of our status in the community, because we're the Khalifa or we're the Imam. You don't have to do this, right? So some of the ulama, they mention that as well, that look, when it comes to financial stuff, some people have that position where they can do these things. But most of us are probably not going to be in that position where, again, let's just say, again, maybe I'll give a contemporary example, right? Let's just say you're a day trader, and that's how you survive. It's just day trading. So at the end of every day, right, market closes, and from that day, I don't want to say what an average amount because I don't know who here day trades and what you guys get. Let's just say somebody makes, I don't know, $500 in a day. Was that a good day? I have no idea. I'm not a day trader. I don't know. Sounds like a decent day, right? $500. I don't know, man. $500, right? And now, I'm pretty sure you don't need $500 every day. I think that more than covers your expenses for the day, depending on what your spouse or your kids want from you, right? So, somebody in that position, maybe that's what they do constantly. 100 to 500 every day. So this is a good day for them. So now that person, because they're used to that, maybe for them, they're like, you know what? I'll give, because my daily amount, maybe I only need to spend on a day $50, right? That's their daily thing. Okay, $50 now, that's my expenditure. 450 now, I'm going to distribute and get rid of right away. So maybe they'll put away, I don't know, a couple hundred for the center. Maybe they have a fund that they're saving, a trust fund maybe for their kids, or maybe a college fund, or they're saving up for their kids to get married. You know, this is a way to do it. So planning for the future is not something that is shunned upon in the Sharia as well. And it's, you know, if I'm not mistaken, there's one narration which, I think it's Salman actually. So some people had found out Salman was saving up money. And some of the companions came and they were basically complaining to Rasulullah. Right? They're like, oh, you know, your favorite guy over here, Salman, this Iranian guy, he's saving money, and you said that we're supposed to be humble and not have money and all this stuff, and this guy's saving. He said, look, why don't you go back and talk to him about this and see why. So they went back to him, I'm paraphrasing obviously, and Salman said, look, I'm securing this today, I'm securing my risk for right now, and at the same time, I'm making sure I'm long-term planning as well, because this is exactly what Allah has wanted. But if Allah doesn't give me something for tomorrow, I'm okay with that as well too. I'm not going to freak out if I don't have something to save tomorrow, but I'm also going to plan for that day as well. Now again, the Ahlul Bayt, they're in a slightly different situation. So we don't want to compare apples to, you know, oranges here in that sense. Some people, let me put it this way. Usually what ulama say is, in every situation, for every individual, they are going to have a specific set of instructions for them. Probably the best example would be like a personal trainer. We might have some general guidelines about healthy eating and healthy living and stuff like that, but using my personal example, maybe keto is not for everybody, right? Maybe some people need to do a slightly different diet, right? So what ulama usually say is, look, there are general things that most of us overspend. We're usually spending beyond our means, especially here, people who are really addicted to spending on things that they don't need. That might be some of our issues. There may be some of us here that are pretty stingy too, that we don't save up anything at all. That we're very, very, you know, stingy, and we're not spending in the right, you know, places. So that can be an issue. So what ulama usually will say is that for every individual, based on their own spiritual issues, they should come to an alim or a local spiritual scholar that they trust, and they will advise them that, look, based on who you are and what your life is, and your long-term plans, your short-term plans, your family environment, all this stuff, maybe you should save or you should not save or do this, do that. There'll be very specific instructions. But look, the overspending thing, we don't want to do that, and we also don't want to be, you know, stingy as well.
Can we ask questions or we have to type it?
If you're okay, saying it out loud. Yeah, sure.
This question is for the attorney. Can
Yes.
you explain to us, to a layman like me, what a trust is?
Sure.
Because, I mean, I'm seeing questions being thrown, but
Yeah.
there's no, you know, some people won't understand what probate means or
Sure.
what a trust is,
Sure.
the benefits of it, how to go about to form it, what is the cost factor, how the trust operates, is it like an entity or is it recorded? If you
Yeah.
can explain to us in a
Sure.
nutshell.
So a trust is basically, it's an agreement between a settlor or a grantor, a person who is creating the trust, and a trustee. When it comes to this type of trust, usually you're the trustee. So it's an agreement between you and yourself that I'm putting these properties and these accounts into this trust to be distributed to the beneficiaries. Now, in the beginning, you're the trustee, the settlor, and the beneficiary of the trust. You're allowed to do whatever you want with it. It is its own separate entity. It doesn't have to be recorded or anything like that, but it is an entity. Things can be titled in the name of the trust. Once the trust is formed, you can deed property into that trust, and in the trust you designate who is going to be the initial trustees and then the successor trustees if the initial trustees pass away. So once the initial trustee passes away, the successor trustee takes over the trust, and then there's usually provisions that what is going to happen upon my death. And upon my death, I want you to sell the properties and distribute according to so-and-so, according to the Sharia, or I want 1/3 to go to this charity and the rest to be, the 2/3 to be distributed, etc. Timeline, it basically, it doesn't take long to create a trust. It's just coming up with the agreement, the form of it. It just needs to be kept in a safe place. And if you're going to sell your property during your life, you just have to provide that trust agreement to the title company or to the bank, and once they see the agreement and sees that you're the trustee and that you have the power to do so, you're able to act upon it. And then the cost, it really depends on how complicated it is. As I had shown before, most of the time you're looking at around $2,000, $2,500 to create a trust.
But does one still need a will with the trust?
You do have a will as well, and the will will have those other provisions that the Imam was talking about, what you want to do as your burial, etc. And we do what's called a pour-over will, just in case you forgot to put something into the trust, then anything else would pour over to the trust, would go over into the trust.
How do you avoid probate? Sorry.
Yes.
No, it's okay.
How do you avoid probate?
Yes, to avoid probate.
Sorry,
Yeah.
because
Sure.
not everybody can hear him. And on the mics, can you just repeat what he's saying, if you don't mind?
So he's saying, how do you avoid probate? By having a trust and the property already in the trust, and let's say you have a retirement account, you designate the trust as the beneficiary, so everything automatically goes into the trust. The trust agreement and the successor trustee will be able to handle or manage the property without having to go through probate. That's how you avoid it. And probate is the court process that you have to go through in order to effectuate a will, if that's all you have. Okay?
Good.
I have a question. Before you go to those, and just to clarify on the Sharia part.
Sure.
So there is certain, obviously there are certain amounts or fractions that you can give to the spouse and your daughter and the son. Those numbers are different, right, according to Sharia. But that's when the will is executed after your death. Do those rules only affect you after your death, or do those rules also, let's say at the age of 60, I now want to distribute to my children and my wife the wealth that is there.
Okay.
Do I still have to follow those particular rules?
Got it. Okay. So just to repeat, so you hit 60, you have wealth, it's your wealth, you can dispose of it however you see fit, right? So basically you're just giving out gifts then, right? You can do it, it's your money, paid your khums and all that stuff, yeah, then you do whatever you want with it. Now, upon death, that's when the rules of inheritance then come there and say, look, those 2/3, the way that Allah has designated, that's it, it's done. So again, if you had that, one kid you didn't really like so much, whatever, well, they're gonna get all that much, right? Or again, depending on how, whatever sort of tiers are alive, right? Depending on how things break down. Then, sometimes the way that it breaks down, again, I don't like to put it like this, but that's just somehow certain families are like that, where you know that there are certain members of a family that they don't need that extra money, but after you die, it's going to end up going to them. And they're the type that won't, out of fairness, distribute it back to everybody else who needs it within the family, meaning the other siblings or if their mother or father is still alive, right? Unfortunately, this does happen. I've seen this with, again, I'm generalizing here, but I've seen this a few times. Wealthy individuals, they inherit from their mother or father, and their other siblings are not doing so well. And they knew, generally, without it being written down, that their mother and father would want that money to have been distributed properly back to their kids, because they know that, I'm doing well, and they wouldn't do it. He said, I know better to do this. I can invest this money, I'll do much better with it, you can't touch it. And it gets really messy. And again, sometimes this happens because you have, let's say, one son, many daughters, things like this, or if there's no kids, or kids are overseas. There's so many different, issues that we don't end up, thinking about. And yeah. So remember also that if you're going to gift it or give it out while you're alive, if you're in the taqlid of Ayatul Sistani, then you're going to have to pay khums on it, right? Because Ayatul Sistani says when you give a gift, that's khumsable. Not every madja has that ruling, but Ayatul Sistani does. Yeah.
So that stands for cash, property,
Bitcoin, whatever you want to give.
Any asset. Yeah, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Okay.
whatever you want to gift. If you're gifting something, according to Ideal Sistani, that gift is khumsable, right? Inheritance, though, is not. So that's why sometimes people will not gift it because of the idea of khums, right? So if somebody gifts somebody, right, you gift your spouse something, khums is liable on it. If they inherit it, there is no khums on that. Let me give another example too. I know, numbers are running, it's good, do that, no. We want to make sure that our families are taken care of, it's obvious. We don't want Sam Chachu to come and take away our money, right? Uncle Sam, that's what I'm talking about. You don't want him to take away that money. It doesn't belong to them, we know what they do with that money. You don't want them to have that money. You want to be able to have, as Allah says, I want you to have say in this money and how it's dispersed. That's why we're saying, that's why I give these narrations. We have a right, we have a responsibility. We know who within our family, within our inheritors, within our extended family, who should be getting this stuff, so we should use that right that Allah has given us. Whether it's while we're alive and we're distributing it at that point, or writing it out in our will and distributing it, or using our, our sort of 1/3 right that we have in that sense.
So now the question
Sure.
is that if you move all this stuff to a trust,
Okay?
is that 20% code still valid?
Oh boy. If you move the stuff to a trust.
So basically,
Yeah.
before your death,
Yeah.
moving everything to the trust.
Okay?
Right? And obviously, that is distribution of wealth, really, if you think about it. Because in the trust, it will mention as to who gets what, right?
Yeah, upon your
You're
death.
distributing that wealth in the trust.
You said so, yeah, you're setting aside money, but it's not going to anybody yet.
It's
It
still
hasn't been
yours.
distributed.
Yeah, it's still yours, and you're
So it's still yours.
So if the distribution is done after you die, that's okay.
That's inheritance then.
You can tell them that, okay, I'm gifting you this, but you're not going to get it until I die.
Which is basically then it's inheritance, right? Because what you're saying is this, like, look, I've got 1/3 inheritance, right? I have 1/3 of my leftover wealth. This is what has been written down. Again, you have it clearly written in your trust. So now after that person dies, when they get that, it's khums free, right? Whether that's property, whatever it is. Now, after the 1 year, then that's a whole different story, right? Because we know that that person's, I have to mention this as well, just because now you are calculating, let me make sure you take the calculations all the way, right? Let's just say there's an investment property or something. You pass that on, it goes through the inheritance, right? Maybe you put that in the trust, now it comes, it's split amongst your kids. They sit on that house for a year. So when it was inheritance, khums free, you're good to go. 1 year is done, okay, then now that's assets that they have, that's khumsable, because now that's stuff that they held on to. If it's appreciated, again, I don't want to make this into a khum session, because then we're going to go off on all these tangents and stuff like that, right? All I'm saying is, that's why I'm telling you all, think about it ahead of time. You need to do the numbers and work out stuff so that you basically maximize how much your kids are going to get. Again, I've seen the same thing happen as well, where people are sitting down, they're waiting, and they end up paying khums when they didn't need to do it in the first place, right? When it could have been set up where it was a inheritance, which again, basically saying it's a gift after I'm dying, basically, in that sense, which is fine because they're waiting for that. And because they had done that, they didn't have to pay any khums on it, and they waited after their parent or whatever or spouse had died, then they sold the property, and they were able to use that fully, right, without having to pay khums on it. And there are some people who did it beforehand for whatever reason, and then they ended up paying the khums on it, and it became, sort of a whole issue. Again, there's nothing wrong with paying khums, but you don't have to do it unnecessarily in that sense. If they don't need it right now, there's no point. Allah has already made enough of these rules easy enough for us, if we learn them the right way. Again, sometimes it gets overcomplicated, I know. Even myself, it kind of spins my head sometimes. That's why usually I'll leave it to like Mulana Rizvi. I'm like, look, he's written enough books and stuff like that, let him handle all these things. But there are ways where we can work within the Sharia, where we can, in a sense, maximize the amount that we get, which is useful for projects that we have going on here, whether it's our family or other things that we need in our lifetime. Hope that makes sense, yeah? Yeah. Sure.
What about in terms of going back to the will?
Yeah.
Do we have like a template where it has
Huh.
the Florida law as well as
Oh.
the Sharia piece in it?
Have you seen anything like that? I don't think it can't be done in that sense. The only way that, based on what I understood, correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, is that this trust has to be set up then. That would be the only way to do it properly, right?
Yeah, I mean,
For married couples.
for married couples, I mean, you can still do it by will, and the husband or wife can waive that elective share as well.
Okay.
There's also other issues with the joint property as well, that if you don't have it in a trust, then the joint property actually passes outside of of probate. So it actually doesn't go through the probate. If husband and wife own a house and one passes away, automatically by law it goes to the other spouse. So unless they have it in a trust and the trust says no, the 50% would go to my heirs.
Okay.
So
What happens if both, unfortunately, both the husband and the wife pass away?
At the same time?
Yeah.
So he's asking, what if both parents pass away?
If both, then it would go to, usually 50% would go to the husband's heirs, 50% would go to the wife's heirs if it was joint, if it was joint ownership.
So
Yeah.
that's even distribution among the kids then, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then, again, a Shari'i issue, right? If there's...
If they don't have a will.
If they don't have a will, then it would go, if they don't have a will, it goes by Florida law, which would be the intestacy. I mean, it can get very complicated, but generally it goes to the children only. So the parents don't get anything, which is, yep.
Mawlana, don't you feel that this Islamic law
Yeah.
of inheritance was designed when someone passes away and they don't have a will, and then the estate gets distributed, let's say 1/3, this, whatever, to the daughter or son, I'm not sure, whatever
Sure,
the
yeah.
percentage is. That's, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what the gist of this law
What's the
is.
thought behind it?
You know, what's the thought behind it? Because if I'm alive,
Yeah.
okay, I should have the freedom to, put my assets to whichever way I want. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a daughter that's, not competent to handle the asset, or a son I wouldn't want to give to him, But if I die and I don't have a will or anything, that's how I feel that maybe this Islamic law came into place, where, okay, there is no will, so Islamically, how do we do it? We distribute the asset according to that. I don't know, this is just...
No, it's a good thought.
According to Islamic history,
Ji.
I'm not an expert. You're probably
I'm not one either, don't worry.
You're more of an expert than I am. But when this Sharia law, when this law came in, a lot of the inheritance at that time was, I would say probably 99.9% was being given to the male.
Yeah.
The oldest
Well, not
son.
99, I mean, so the questions, sorry, for those who are watching online. So the questions are about the sort of wisdom and the thought process, the historical nature of inheritance laws, right? Like, again, or to put it in very modern terms, patriarchal stuff, right? That's what it seems like. It seems male-dominated. So these same questions are exactly what most of the companions asked too. They said the same thing. They asked Rasulullah, they asked the 5th Imam, they asked the 8th Imam, they asked all the Imams that said, look, at least at that time, they said, look, men are the ones who are out there doing all this stuff. Well, they're getting all this money. The women are the ones who are not going out. Why are they getting less? So that was their thinking too, in that sense. So they said, look, if you're going to look at this stuff, you need to look at Islam holistically, completely, right? So right now, for all the fathers, the husbands who are here, whose job is it wajib to take care of the family? The man. Nafaqah, you have to pay for everything. Shelter, it's on you. Transportation, on you. Clothing, on you. Food, on you. Everything is on you. What does a woman have to pay for? Nothing. Never once in her life is there any financial obligations at all, ever. Never. So now think of just any sort of situation. You have one son, one daughter, right? That son, so you're obviously, as a father, you're responsible for both of them. Now, when you die, most of that money, right, will go to the son, and a small part of it will now go to the daughter. That son, if he gets married, what is he going to do with that money? He has to use it to take care of his family, because it's going to be wajib on him to take care. That daughter, if she gets married, she's got somebody else taking care. So that money is going right in her pocket. That son is probably going to have to spend it on his family. So the way that it's been described in the words of the Ahlul Bayt is that this distribution of wealth is based on the rights and obligations that Allah has designated to both genders as well. Because the rights and obligations of spending is on the man, that's why more is going to go to him. And because there are 0 rights and obligations on the woman, they still get something out of it. But it's not as much because they have no rights and obligations to spend anything. There's nothing there. At the same time, that's also why 1/3 is up for you to distribute as you see fit as well. You can't do that, and in many situations, the daughters would end up getting more than the son too, depending on how it's distributed, who else is alive. Like that can happen as well too. Now, yeah, if you want to gift it while you're alive, of course you can do that. You can set these stuff aside. That's fine too. That just depends on what you want to do. So I don't know if that answers, it doesn't answer, if there's more questions that follows that. I mean, this is a bigger discussion, obviously. Maybe not for a will inheritance seminar in that sense, but I understand the thought process. Look, in the modern age too, that's why a lot of siblings will make sure that they sit down ahead of time. All of them will sit there and talk, say, look, based on our economic situations, hey, maybe the daughter is sitting there on Wall Street, she's doing really well, and the son, I don't know, right? He's doing something else, and maybe paycheck to paycheck. So there they sit down and say, look, let's write it down right now that you will give up your right to inheritance and give it to your son. And you can write these things down, and that's how it'll be enforced. And you can do that stuff, it's fine too. The reason that the Shar'i obligations are there too is because, look, this is the normal bare minimum situation that most people are going to be in, especially in an Islamic society. Even over here, generally speaking, that's still going to be the case. Now, can a woman go out and work and provide? Yeah, that's her choice. Does she have to do it? No. She can say, I can go, if I want to go out and work, I can do that, and I can keep every single dollar in my pocket, and I can have a separate account and not even tell you about it. They have that right. But a man can't do that. They have to go and make sure that they spend and provide and do all this stuff too, right? So you ask the question, it's making it worse for you guys. I don't know why you ask these things, so now you're going to have to pay up more. But, okay.
I have a follow-up question, but I think he's getting bored now.
Let's see.
Hussein has a question.
Yeah, there's a lot on Slido too, so I don't know what I want to do. Let me jump to this. So this one goes back to somebody asking about, I mean, I think we hit most of the stuff about what's involved in Sadaq but trust. I think you said that.
Yeah.
Do both the husband and wife need to be present when it's there? Timeline, the expenses, I think you mentioned it could be a few grand.
Yes. So again, every situation is different. Some spouses actually do have separate assets, and they do the wife and everything. Nothing is joint. In that case, each one would have to have their own trust. If they do own everything jointly and want to continue to do that, they would have to do a joint trust, and both couples, both husband and wife would have to be present and would have to agree to it.
Awesome. This other one as well. Let's do this. What is the process for estate distribution after one's death?
Okay, so if it's just a will, the process is that the will has to be presented, it has to be given to the court, it has to be proven that this is this person's will, and then it's a long process of probate. You have to send out a notice to creditors, you have to publish in a newspaper, you have to wait for creditors to come. There's different types of administration depending on how much you have. There's summary administration if your estate is less than 75,000. If it's more than 75,000, you have to do something called formal administration. And it goes through court, and then if you have a will, the court will appoint the personal representative, and the personal representative that you appointed in your will take care of distributing the assets and taking care of that.
But sorry, I want to jump to you, Hussein. Let me do this one quickly as well. Does Islam mandate an amount that must go to somebody in the will? Again, the will is completely up to you, right? You get to decide all that stuff with the 1/3 that you have left over, right? So 1/3, it's up to you. Those other 2/3 that you can't touch, that's inheritance. That's not up for you to decide, right? That's why he said there's two different things. There's inheritance that Allah has decided based on which of your inheritors are alive and your leftover assets, all that. That's distributed by the Sharia. 1/3, that's what you end up writing in your will.
But because we live in a non-Muslim country, your will is going to talk about those 2/3 as well, and it's going to designate those 2/3 because otherwise they won't know what you're.
Yeah, and then they're going to end up messing it up. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So you do designate the Shari'i 2/3 and then what you want to do with the 1/3 in it.
And actually, as a follow-up, is it enough? Let's just say somebody, without mentioning the specifics, like, okay, if this person's alive, then this. Can they just say, I want this, whatever, the trust or the distribution to happen according to, for example, Shia Islamic law, and then the court on their own, will they go and find out, okay, let's get somebody locally who knows these things and they'll distribute.
So if you have a trust, you can do that. You tell the trustee to consult the local imam and etc.
Okay.
However, with a will, if you don't designate, it becomes very, very complicated. The court We'll have to take testimony upon, and it could get messy.
It's a mess. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Hussein, sorry.
So we just get a better understanding of a trust. When property or funds are allocated in a trust, and if that person is still living, he still has access to that property and funds to use during his lifetime, even though it's allocated to a trust.
Yes. So,
Could you repeat
so
it,
the question was, does the person, when they put their property into a trust, do they still have access to it? Yes. It's still, for all intents and purposes, yours. It's really just an estate planning vehicle that simplifies things after you pass away. But you could spend the entire trust out and leave it empty before you pass away. And then it would be, there would be nothing to distribute at that point, because you're the initial beneficiary of that trust. Okay?
Awesome. Okay. Does everyone have to go through a court if you have a simple Islamic will? For example, if I have an Islamic will left behind for my family, why would a court get involved? I think we may have answered this, but
so if the property is not, if the property is titled, like a bank account or like real estate, etc., anything that's titled, even retirement account, unless you designate beneficiaries, and you designate the beneficiaries, or you have, or for real estate that you, for real estate, it really will have to go through the court in order to effectuate it, because a will is not going to self-execute. It has to be probated in order for the property title to change, because it's not going to change automatically. So if I own a property and I pass away and I didn't have a trust and it was just me, how are they going to know who my heirs are, etc.? It goes through the probate. And that will, that Islamic will that you left behind, goes to probate court, and the personal representative follows that will and has to go through all of that.
So again, if they go through that whole process of getting it notarized and all those things.
It still would go through probate.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
That's if there's no beneficiaries designated. Yeah, so there's ways you can do if you title, if you make, for instance, if you designate on your bank account transfer on death, on my death, I want my bank account to go 1/2 to this person and 1/4 to this person. It would go automatically outside of any probate or anything like that.
Okay.
How does life insurance proceeds be treated? Is it part of someone's own estate? Is that something where Islamic law comes in and says, oh, you have a life insurance for, let's say, $1,000, $10,000.
Yeah.
1/3 has to go this way, or it can, how is that treated?
So if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to remember how life insurance, have you dealt with a question before about life insurance?
In our fiqh, a lot of people say it's not it's not even allowed to have life insurance, and so there's, yeah.
So I know Sayyid Rizvi has answered this question before. I just watched his lecture today too. It is a different category than everything else.
Yeah, because it's not something that you own during your life, and usually you designate the beneficiaries of the life insurance.
Yeah.
It's something that comes later.
Let me double check. I don't want to give a false answer. Yeah, let me get the right answer, and then I'll get back to you, inshallah. Yeah. How does a person's will and inheritance come to light after their death? How should a will or a trust be stored for proper execution?
So you should put it in a safe place and tell the personal representative where it is, or the trustee where it is, or give them a copy of it. But for a will has to be an original copy in order for it to actually go through probate. The trust, you just let that trustee know where it is, or send them a copy for proper execution.
Under the pillow is okay, right?
Yes, under the pillow, yeah.
Okay, I think we got 2 more, and then, unless nothing else comes in, then I think we should wrap up then. Okay. What are some typical questions that should be discussed between a couple prior to seeing an attorney for estate planning trusts? Is there a checklist per se?
So definitely there's that awkward conversation of whose property, if property is joint, how much is this person's and how much is that person's. And I've seen, like I said, it's a lot of people think that the husband is always the richer party. I've definitely seen where the wife has way more than the husband, and we have that awkward conversation where, you know, maybe we should designate whose is what.
Oh boy.
And separate things that way, because this concept of tenancy or by the entirety, where each party owns the 100%, is a foreign concept, I think, to the Sharia, where I own 100%, my wife owns 100%. We both own the entire. So designating what is the wife's, what is the husband's, because it's not necessarily 50-50. It might be different.
Yeah. Depending on if, let's say, they both put in different amounts, right, to buy the property and stuff.
Or in the bank account.
Yeah. Oh man, I do not want to be in that room. Okay, last one. Do retirement accounts or life insurance benefits belong to the surviving spouse automatically, or would the spouse need to waive rights to that as well, so they are handled according to the inheritance rules? It's like a mix of both, right?
Yeah, so life insurance, again, that's a separate matter. Retirement accounts are you designate beneficiaries, and usually people designate their spouse as the beneficiary because there are tax benefits to doing that. But the retirement is actually your savings that you put aside. So it is, according to what I've dealt with in the past, it is subject to Islamic inheritance rules.
Yeah, and usually this is why, if they discuss it and have it set out beforehand with their inheritors, like usually with their kids, that look, this is how this stuff is going to be distributed, then it makes things much less messy, right?
Yeah.
In that sense.
So in my situation, the thing is, we're always talking about kids. A lot of times people forget about the parents because parents get 1/6 each. And that's where joint property becomes confusing, because if we're just a married couple and there's 4 parents usually, and and then the kids are shared. So the kids we're not having any problem with, but it's the parents. What happens if I die first? Will my 50% go to the parents, etc.?
Yeah, to get them involved then. And
exactly.
Make sure, like, hey, your grandkids deserve this now. Okay. So yeah, the life insurance question, I'll get back to everybody. Maybe I'll mention it, if not tomorrow night, then I'll save it for Thursday, inshallah. But I think, yeah, actually it's 11:30 on the dot. So I think with your permission, I think let's wrap up. It's okay. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope, I know you mentioned the amount before, but I think we can get a Groupon going or something like that for estate planning,
we'll help,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Inshallah, we can
we'll talk later about that, inshallah.
Yes,
but,
inshallah.
I hope that this was beneficial for people to at least hear some of these ideas out. And again, I'm going to say it again because I think this is the main takeaway, is you wait too long, it's going to come back and bite somebody, right? And then when it bites somebody, that same person who gets bitten is going to go and bite everybody else. And you're going to have a bunch of hungry people in the family just biting and going after one another. I forgot to mention this too. So there are a few different resources. I don't know if it's viewable, or I don't know if you can expand it. So basically, there's a few recommendations for those who want to go and see templates or get a general idea. So most of you know Sayyid Mohammad Rizvi has done work on this constantly for many, many years. So now again, this is designed for Canada, but at the same time, you can have a general template for yourself. And then, again, if you want to use a lawyer, then obviously use a lawyer to make sure everything's okay, or set up the estate based on the stuff that you've listed out. It's templates that they've created so you can list out all the different assets that you have, how you want to disperse your 1/3, all those things are meant there. So there's 2 different sources. This one, I believe, yeah, this is the one that Sayyid Mohammad Rizvi has designed with this, I think, Al-Ma'arif Foundation. Yeah, so it's al-m.ca/will, and maybe we'll have them throw it in the weekly or something. In addition, Hasan, thank you. There's another website as well. It's a World Federation built. They have their own template that they've designed too. Again, these are general templates. Don't think you can, as I think we've said, don't print it out and say, it's under my pillow, that's it. We've said that probably won't work in the majority of situations. So you need to make sure that it's checked out. Again, hopefully we get that nice Muslim discount that we need, and inshallah our akhiras and the future of our families will be secure there. So this one, what is it? I forgot. If you can just scroll up to the address so people can at least see it. But again, maybe we'll share it in the weekly as well. Yeah. So they have all the rulings and stuff for those who want to check it out. Can you just go and check out the actual URL so people can take a look?
It's like it's in Britain.
Is it? That's it? Yeah. I mean, look, if you Google Shia wills, you're either going to get this or you're going to get something about Shia LaBeouf. You're only going to get two. There's only two kind of hits that you get. That's pretty much it. So you'll find there. But again, maybe we'll tell the MC to throw it in the weekly so that everybody can grab it there. The other thing too is Sayyid Mohammad Rizvi has I think it's a 2+ hour lecture series where he goes through a lot of these things, including the life insurance one. But again, for those who probably won't watch it, I'll go and I'll grab that specific one and I'll mention it in one of the future lectures, inshallah. But he goes through a lot of the things. He goes through some specific situations on if this person's living, this person dies, what's going to happen. For those who are interested, watch that lecture. He has a book as well that's available, so that might be helpful for you. Now, he's spent a lot of time on this, and I've told you guys before. Legal rulings are not my forte, but the general points, inshallah, if you need me to research for you, I can do that, or I can consult with Sayyid Mohammad Rizvi as well. So again, hopefully this was beneficial. For me, this was beneficial to hear all these points from Brother Abdul Rahman. So thank you all for attending, asking your questions, and participating. We'll end. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ahli bayti tayyibin tahirin. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.